Thank you for joining us for this installment of the Root Cause Coalition's How-To webinar series. My name is Rachel Carlson, and I am the membership coordinator here at the Root Cause Coalition. Before we get started, I wanted to go over a few logistical items for the webinar. Attendees, you will be in listen-only mode for the duration of the webinar. This webinar is being recorded and will be available to view at rootcausecoalition.org later this week, as well as a copy of the slides. The panelists will be taking audience questions at the end, but if you have a question, please type it into the question pane located at the right side of your screen, and I will give them to our panelists at the end of the presentation. If you have any issues with hearing or any sort of technical difficulties, please also send me a question. I will be happy to work with you through that. We are so excited to have our esteemed panelists join us today to share their expertise on how to set up an on-campus food pantry. And at this time, I would like to pass it off to Lillian Rosalind, who is the Executive Director at the Community Health Fund. So Lillian, take it away.
Thank you, Rachel, and good morning, everyone, from somewhat sunny Walnut Creek, California. It's a privilege to have this opportunity to join with the Community Health Fund partners, Caitlin Sly, Program Manager for the Food Bank of Contra Costa and Solano, John Wen, Student Life Coordinator for Los Medanos Community College, and Lester Olmsted Rose, Partner with Piana Consulting, to share about the evolution and development of the Contra Costa Food Pantry Collaborative, which also includes California State University East Bay's Concord campus. The Community Health Fund endeavors to support nonprofit organizations working to improve the health and well-being of medically uninsured, underinsured, underserved, and vulnerable populations most at risk for poor health in Contra Costa County. In recent years, we've broadened our grant-making priorities to include addressing the social determinants of health. This presentation this morning focuses specifically on increasing food security among local college students and their families. To start off for context, I want to give you a little background and demographics about the region we'll be addressing today. Contra Costa County occupies the northern portion of the East Bay of the San Francisco Bay Area, and it's primarily suburban. The population is 1.5 million. Almost 9% of residents live below the poverty line. The largest demographic living in poverty are females ages 25 to 34, followed by males 25 to 34, and then females 18 to 24. So you'll see that the poverty level here also aligns with the ages of the students, the majority of the students that are attending our local colleges. The median value of owner-occupied housing is $520,000, and the median two-bedroom monthly rental is approximately $2,000 a month. Los Medanos College, which will be featured in today's presentation, is situated in eastern Contra Costa County. With a population of 300,000, the region is the most underserved in the county, with areas of high historic poverty, unemployment, geographic isolation, and a lack of social support services. This is in stark contrast to other Bay Area regions, most notably Silicon Valley. Next slide, please. The goal of today's presentation is to share with you elements of the process that allowed for the successful launch of the Food Pantry Collaborative, which include the ideation stage, where we were focused on recognizing the need and tackling it collaboratively, cultivating relationships with colleges, identifying the needs and what's being done. The next stage we moved into was planning, obtaining partner commitment, foundation support for planning, and conducting a collaborative business planning process. And finally, the launch and the advancement of the initiative, implementing the business plan, reflecting on the lessons learned, starting to think about future development and plans, and from the get-go and continuing focusing on the sustainability of the initiative. Next slide. While attending the Root Cause Coalition's 2017 annual summit, I was shocked to learn about the national food insecurity epidemic amongst college students. Specifically, at that time, according to a national survey that was conducted by the Wisconsin Hope Lab, 36% of college and university students reported lacking consistent access to enough food for an active, healthy life. So when I returned back to California, I was strongly committed that the Community Health Fund must learn about and help address food security needs at our local colleges. So I immediately contacted the food bank of Contra Costa in Solano, a longtime grantee and valued community partner, to assess the organization's interest in and capacity to address the issue. Turns out we were quite fortunate. It was a topic that they had been considering for some time. So with that, I encouraged Caitlin Sly, the food bank's program director, to conduct her due diligence and try to cultivate partners who were interested in addressing the need on their respective campuses. So I'm going to turn it over now to Caitlin, who will share about the beginning of the journey.
Thanks, Lillian. Next slide. So as Lillian mentioned, I'm Caitlin Sly, the program director at the Food Bank of Contra Costa in Solano. We are a food bank in the East San Francisco Bay Area, an area particularly affected by high housing costs, especially in suburban areas. Our mission is to end hunger, and we recognize that we cannot do it alone. We started hearing about student hunger at the same time many of you probably did. We were reading articles and studies, and our board especially was really shocked at the level of student hunger in our area. And it really fit within our goals because we believe that education should be a way out of poverty, and no student should have difficulty studying or making trade-offs between buying books or buying food. So we got support from our executive director and our board. We recognize that policy is also important. California has done some really unique things to address student hunger, but today we want to share our experience of starting a college pantry. We started reaching out to colleges in our local area. We kind of started reaching out to anyone and everyone at those colleges. We didn't know who to reach out to. And we eventually got connected with the Student Life Office. We found out that they were already in the nascent stages of building a pantry, which we were really excited about. But we also wanted to make sure there was institutional support. We wanted to make sure that it was more than a school project. School projects are great, but school projects also graduate with the student projects. We knew it had to be sustainable, and we really didn't want to create programs that people rely on and then they go away. Next slide. So we really had to figure out how to plan in a way that works for everyone. We wanted to determine which pantries that we reached out to were really ready to go to the next level and what resources they would need to get there. We identified two colleges that seemed to fit that mold: Medanos College in Pittsburgh and Cal State East Bay in Concord. We then introduced the pantry staff to the Community Health Fund and made sure that the pantries had buy-in from the top. So we met with their executive director, president, and their foundation folks. The Community Health Fund really liked where we were going, and so we all sat down and met with everyone involved. And John from Medanos College can share how from his point of view, how everything came about. Next slide.
Perfect. Hi, everyone. I'm John from Medanos College, and I am seriously super excited to be here. The reason why is because I just love talking about all of our successes that we've had at the food pantry and what we were able to learn from other organizations as well. So I actually wanted to start off this with a story about what happened with the food pantry and how we actually started and the origin of the food pantry itself. So there was an instructor at Medanos College by the name of Scott Worf. He is an English instructor right now, and he noticed that some of his students' test scores were actually pretty low. Upon further investigation, he found out that a lot of his students were homeless and living in their cars and couldn't afford food. So what he did was that he took the initiative and actually went out and purchased food from his own pocket and gave them to students, which was, when I heard that, I was just absolutely astonished by, his hospitality for our students on campus. So the thing was that a lot of the students in the class noticed that their classmates and friends didn't have food. They were coming up at the end of the class to pick up food so that they could prepare for their next class. So these students were just completely shocked about what was happening. So what they decided to do was take action. Instead of just talking about it, they wanted to do something about it. So that's when these group of dedicated students came to my office and told me, "Hey, John, I think we should start a club here on campus so that we can help the students here and our friends, because a lot of them, unfortunately aren't as privileged as other students. So I think it would be great to provide them with free food." So these group of students, they went out and they started doing all of these fundraisers, and they raised thousands and thousands of dollars in order to support the student food needs at Los Medanos College. So over at Los Medanos College, we're really invested in wanting students to transfer and improve their lives and better their lives. So fortunately, they were able to transfer out of our college. Unfortunately, these groups of dedicated students left the college, so it was pretty much just me with pretty much the food pantry. It could have just stopped there, and I could have just stopped the entire project. But what I realized was that a lot of students actually needed what we offered them. So what we decided to do was institutionalize the pantry itself and house it under the department that I was part of, which was the student life department. So we basically knew that food insecurity is a real issue in our community and school, and that we knew that we needed to help our students. To be honest with all of you, it was quite difficult to really gather the funds with just me as a staff member and no other students by my side. Fortunately enough, we got some students who were interested in being volunteers and working at the pantry itself to serve our students and to provide food for them. One particular day during the planning process, something magical happened. Tom's Shoes heard about all the good news that we were doing, and they decided to generously offer $10,000 in grant money to jumpstart the food pantry. So because of their $10,000 grant, we were ready to enter a partnership with our local food bank, which was the food bank of Contra Costa in Solano, and also receive support from a consulting firm to efficiently operate our food pantry. At this point, I'd like to introduce Lester Olmsted Rose, the consultant who helped us with making our pantry the best it can be. Next slide.
Great. Thank you, John. This is Lester Olmsted Rose with Piana Consulting. My sound quality was poor when we tested this, so I hope you can all hear me well. I was brought into this project, as you've already heard, at a point where the idea had already been described. The partners, the people who had responsibility for moving this forward, the colleges, a funder, had already come together. And I was brought in at that point to engage in this planning process and facilitate it. In this situation, the consultant, we as the consultant, we act as an intermediary organization. And that allowed the Community Health Fund to support community groups, and in this case, the colleges, in order for them to build their thinking and to design their program. So once there's an idea, how do they build it out? And this allows the fund to do that. And what's nice about this approach for the fund is that the collaborators, so especially in this kind of collaborative relationship, the collaborators are able to deepen their relationship on the one hand, and the fund is also able to really know that the quality of the planning will be there, that the grantees, if they get a grant later on, that they're going to have a strong plan, and that they're going to know how to start at the beginning, and that they're going to design the plan and design their work to make sure that it is the best for their clients and best for their organizations, without the fund being in the room day to day, but still while that relationship is being built. So it works very well. So it works very well that at the end of the day, you end up with a plan that is actionable. You end up with a fund knowing the participants and having a strong relationship, knowing how they got to the kind of decisions that they got to, again, without the fund really being right in the middle of every conversation. Next slide, please. Actually, as we're transitioning slides, just to mention again, in addition to the folks on this call, the Cal State University East Bay Concord campus was also involved at this early stage. And then after the plan, others came in, as you'll hear later. I'd just like to give a call out to Concord. So sometimes people say, well, why a plan? Like, we know what to do. A pantry seems like a pretty straightforward thing. The food bank's there. This is what they do. But there's some real advantages to pausing before you launch in order to plan. And that's especially true in the case where there is a collaboration involved. So the first thing here is commonality. In a collaboration, people walk into the room with slightly different ideas. Even if they've started by agreeing to something, they have a slightly different idea one from another about what they're actually working towards. And so it's really great through a planning process as you dig into the information, your hopes, your detailed plans, your detailed activities, how you're going to move it forward, to build that common sense of purpose first and foremost. There's common learning that takes place. So as one organization, you see the light bulb go off sometimes over people's heads, where they're learning something and they learned it because one of the other folks at the table was able to share something. And then there's also the planning that helps you to tee up what the common resources are. And in this case, that happened in 2 or 3 cases. Really simple example was the food bank had a great contact with somebody at the county, Contra Costa County, who could do food demonstrations. And so there was a resource. The food bank had really easy access to that person, was able to make those introductions and make sure the resource was shared with the colleges. Those are the kinds of things that happen through a collaborative planning process. The other thing that happened is communications. On the one hand, for any of you listening who work in an institutional kind of a bureaucratic setting, and in this case, colleges, which the 2 colleges we started with are as least bureaucratic as a college can be, but still there's a little bit of that. And so engaging in the planning process makes it real, and it becomes a way for people like John to talk with the administration and to seek the administration's support. Actually, it's required to say, yes, we want you to move forward with this. So it was a way to communicate throughout the college to build support. And it's also a planning process is a great way to build funder support. In this case, not only the Community Health Fund, but the end product, the plan, the thought that goes into it, the solid relationships. It allows the group to go to other funders to seek additional support. And then the final thing is, of course, preparation, which is what we would most associate with planning. But that preparation comes in surprising ways. You have relationships. You develop trust because you often, in a collaborative planning process, surprising issues come up where there's a difference of opinion or a difference of approach, and folks have to work that through. And in doing that, then you develop trust, you develop those relationships, and you really begin to understand not just what we want to do, not just how we plan to do it, but also who we are doing it and how we want to work together, and who each other is. Next slide, please. So the work we get into in a planning process is summarized here. First, there's program design, and in a collaboration, actually anytime, you really want to start, as I mentioned before, with what is the purpose or what is the program mission. Make sure that everybody agrees on the purpose of working together, or the purpose of what you're designing. And so that sounds obvious. It's easy to forget that. And so you want to drill down there. And then one of the things we often do in collaborative planning or any new program design is considering how the program is going to work from the perspective of a client, somebody who's going to walk through the program and kind of think about how they contact the service, how they're introduced to the service, how they're warmly received, how they're connected to whatever the service is, and what the service looks like. So to walk through it. In the case of the food pantry, it was a little bit different. In this case, we wanted to think of most of the conversation was around the ways that each of the colleges wanted to grow opportunities for each pantry. They were just starting this work. They knew they were just scratching the surface of meeting needs, and they wanted to think about what were great ways to grow together. And so that really became a big focus of the collaborative effort. How could they, we talked about this on the last slide, how could they learn together? How could they borrow ideas from each other? And how could they identify resources that they could all leverage one for the other? So we get into program, and then that always moves. The next thing that planning always gets into is staffing. If you develop this new program, how are you going to staff it? And in this case, we identified some different positions or fleshing out some capacity at each of the organizations. I think you'll hear a little bit more about that later. So including the food bank, which remained kind of the center piece, the center organization, as well as the others. And then you always need to get into governance and decision making. The reality is when you work with more than one person, you have to figure out how you're going to make decisions. In this case, there wasn't a huge amount of need for kind of shared decisions around tough issues, but there's always some. And so just talking about how decisions are going to be made, what you do when there's conflict. Again, you want to think about that in advance so that when something comes up, you've mapped out how you're going to work together and what your approach is. And then the final thing here, resources, that's such a nice word to say, okay, what's it going to cost? And so fleshing out a budget, sometimes more than one budget, sometimes, thinking about the Cadillac version and sometimes the Chevy version of what you're doing can come in really handy. And so definitely fleshing out what things are going to cost. And that pushes to priorities a lot. What can we pay for now? What can we wait to do later? Next slide, please. So here's the final thing. All that effort, all the time it takes to come together, people who are busy with lots of work to do. And honestly, the day that you finish the plan, the day that you launch it, your first step to move it forward, and your plan is out of date. And it doesn't matter. That happens. It doesn't matter what a great job you did in planning. The world changes around you. The assumptions you made that went into the plan, those assumptions are tested, and you find out they're slightly off and sometimes a lot off. Really, the final and greatest benefit of engaging in a deep planning process is that the collaborators have built the relationships, they've grappled with the tough issues, they've deepened their trust, all these things we talked about. They understand the issues so that as soon as the first thing tells them that they've made an error, they're headed in the wrong way, or they need to adjust, they're ready for that because they've thought it through and they know what they're doing and they know each other, so they can respond quickly and accurately. And so this is just a note I want to make on this point, especially to the funders in the audience, which is keep this in mind. And I think most funders do understand this, but I know lots of times grantees are really nervous. If they give the funder a plan and say, we're going to do A, B, and C, and it turns out they have to do B1, B2, B3 before they can get to C, they're a little nervous that the funder is going to think something is wrong. That's not a sign that something is wrong. That's a sign that you're paying attention as you're implementing something new and different, and you're learning about it. So it's about communication and funders and grantees cultivating relationships with each other so that you can communicate effectively about these kinds of changes. You can expect them and communicate about them as they continue. So now Caitlin's going to talk about what happened. The plan is done and they're ready to launch.
Yeah, thank you. Next slide. So in December 2017, we submitted our business plan. The one Lester mentioned was already outdated, and proposal to the Community Health Fund. The food bank's staff and leadership, as well as the two colleges' staff and leadership, presented in front of the Community Health Fund's board and staff. And we were really excited to collectively receive a $75,000 grant. And that was for all three organizations. So relatively speaking, it was a pretty affordable investment. The Community Health Fund's board was asking us, is that really all you're asking for? And we said, yeah, we are going to make it effective. And we're going to make it effective also because the colleges and the food bank had recognized the need for investing our staff time as well. Next slide. At the food bank in year one, we hired a part-time college pantry coordinator, and he was really able to invest the time needed to add more college pantry sites. So we recruited 3 additional sites. We also brought all of the college pantry staff together quarterly for shared learning, sharing ideas, pushing forward those aha moments. We, as Lester mentioned, were able to connect the colleges with our local county public health department, who now is able to do food demos and tastings at the colleges. And then we also helped start SNAP outreach on campus, both by training the campus staff and also sending out food bank staff that is experts on student eligibility. Next slide. One thing we learned was that as the food bank, our biggest role is convening the colleges together so they can learn from each other. They learn more from each other than they do from us. So any way that we can help share examples from the different colleges with each other, the better. We know that college pantries have different needs compared to our other faith-based partner agencies that may already have a pantry up and running. The student life staff, they're paid staff with a bunch of other responsibilities. So they don't necessarily have time to be picking up food from the food bank. So we started delivery. We also found out that we needed to vary our product inventory to have more variety of foods available, like ready-to-eat foods, soups, stews that can be just heated up. Some campuses don't have food service on campus, so we needed that. We also realized visiting the campuses that they really are serving families, and they have a need for formula, diapers, toiletries. So as much as we're able to provide those items, at the food bank, we try to do that. I think our biggest lesson learned was that timing is key. You can't force a pantry if there isn't support on campus. We were really lucky that when we were reaching out, the pantries were already thinking about this. And so that was a really big key to our success. And John is going to talk next. Next slide.
Perfect. All right. So if you ask me now if I thought we would accomplish much in year one, I would say yes, but really not to this extent. I think we exceeded our expectations, and we were really able to help a lot of students. In the first year alone, we served 200 unique students. This meant 200 different students, which translates to 200 lives that we were able to change just by having the pantry existing at Los Medanos College. At first, we didn't have enough staff to meet student needs at first, but after receiving the Community Health Fund grant, we were able to support our students. I actually wanted to share a story that really touched upon why we do the work that we do. So during the winter on December, it was really cold outside and it was also raining and everything. And I had my heater on in my office, and I unexpectedly received a call on the other line. When I picked up the call, I didn't really hear what the other person was saying She was mumbling here and there, but I was able to make out some of the words that she was saying. One of the sentences that I made out was, "Thank you so much for providing food for me." So I thought to myself, I wasn't really sure who this person was, and I wasn't really sure what she was trying to tell me. So I asked a little bit more, and she told me that she was currently an LMC student living inside her car without food. And it was because of the food pantry that she was able to feed herself during the lunch hours. So I really thought to myself, this can't be true because, I come to work every day and I never really see the people who are living in their cars. So, granted, I thought that this wasn't really a real call until one particular day I decided to walk to my car in the parking lot to see whether or not this was true. Lo and behold, there was that student who was living in her car eating our food. Not only that, but when I looked around a little bit more, there were actually other students living in their cars. So I think that really touches upon, the little world that we live in. When we don't really look around, we don't really see the other people who, aren't probably as privileged as us. So we need to do something about it, and we do need to make a change. So what I did was that I invited all of these students to our food pantry, gave them bags, and told them to pick up as much food as they like. At first they were hesitant and they weren't really sure whether or not this was a scam or anything. But then I showed them my business card and I told them that you can pick up as much food as you like. Don't even worry about it. And next time you need more food, just feel free to come to our pantry, or if we're closed, go ahead and give me a call and I'll be more than happy to open up the pantry for you so that you can pick up foods. So as all of them were picking up foods and leaving, one particular student stood out to me. She was the last student who left, and I think it was because she wanted to talk to me about something. So when I looked at her, she seemed to have, some ragged clothes, and she looked a little bit malnourished. And she just looked at me, and I wasn't really sure what was happening at that time, so I was looking at her back, and she started crying, and she told me, "Thank you for giving me this food." And, my response was, absolutely, this is what we're here for. But the thing that she said afterwards really touched my heart. She was like, "Thank you so much for giving me food. This is not only for myself, but also for my family as well." So that's when I realized students aren't really picking up foods just for themselves, but they're also picking up food so that they can feed their families at home, or even families who are living in cars. So that's when I realized that the work that we do is absolutely helpful and very beneficial to our community. With that being said, we realized that we needed to do good for our community. So we started coming up with new ideas in order to better support our community at Los Medanos College. During the holidays, we have a lot of great foods that we enjoy with our families. Unfortunately, a lot of people don't have that privilege to enjoy these amazing foods with their families. So what we decided to do was provide food baskets for students during the holidays so that they can enjoy with their families as well. Additionally, what we realized was that a lot of students didn't really know where the food pantry was or what we were all about. So instead of them coming to us, we started something called the pop-up pantry. So basically, pop-up pantries is the idea of us going to them as opposed to them coming to us. So we strategically went around campus to see where most students would walk and set up a table there with a bunch of canned foods and different types of foods as well to give away to students. During that time, we told students that we actually exist on campus and that if they would like to come and pick up foods anytime they like, they're able to come. It's completely anonymous and it's completely free of charge. So when they heard that, we had so many people just come to our food pantry and pick up foods. So that's how we increased the amount of numbers of students coming to our pantry. There was this one story when a student came in and she was like, "You have so much, you have a lot of great canned foods here. I don't really know how to cook them." For me as well, when I'm at home, I don't really know how to cook some of my foods that I purchase as well. So I could relate with the students. So what we did was that we partnered up with the food bank of Contra Costa in Solano and had a person come, a chef come, to actually do food demonstrations. So the really cool thing about the food demonstrations was that the foods that we picked up were all straight from the food pantry. So we were able to teach students how to meal prep, how to make healthy foods using the foods that they pick up from our pantry. And I think that made a world of a difference because students were actually comfortable with what they were eating and how they were preparing their foods. In the middle of year one, we realized that a lot of people were coming to our food pantry. So now, with the grant that we received, we were able to increase the number of student workers to meet the student food demands. Additionally, we realized that students just didn't want canned foods, so we started to supply eggs and perishables for students to take home with them to feed their families. With all this being said, we needed to focus on really providing for our students who had to work during the day and had to make ends meet for their families. So what we decided to do was expand our hours all the way until 7 p.m. so that folks who are working could actually come to the campus later and pick up foods. And I think that really makes a world of a difference because now we're providing opportunities for students to pick up foods. All right, next slide. All right, so you're hearing a lot from me about how we're changing lives, but what I would like to show all of you now is a video of how our pantry has made a direct impact and difference in the lives of our students. So all the students that you're seeing now are students who have actually benefited and picked up food from the food pantry. The video is a little bit choppy, so please bear with us, but I think this will really go a long way.
Food pantry arose out of a need that I witnessed in my own class when I saw students who were coming to class without having eaten anything.
The food pantry opened its door for the very first time in March of 2017.
Food pantries helped me because in my family we struggle a lot with food, and so individually I could come here and just grab some food for myself.
Not having to worry if I have enough, money in my account or dollars in my pocket to buy something for myself.
Without the fuel, you won't be able to focus on your classes, do homework, or really academically excel as you would want to. People who can use the food pantry are LMC students. All they have to be is current student, have a current LMC student ID, and be willing to take the intake form to join the food pantry.
I don't have to spend a lot of money on groceries, so I have more money to actually be able to buy my books and stuff I need for school instead of having to worry about like my next meal or when I'm eating again, because this is here for me.
Donations are extremely important to the existence of our food pantry. Without the food that we have here for our students, a lot of them would come home empty-handed, and they would be unable to feed themselves or their families.
Without funding from outside sources, outside donations, we don't have the money we need in order to remove one of the more significant barriers of student success, which is hunger.
We can't do this alone. We need your help to support the future generation. We all have a part in making our community better, and we should start with our students here at LMC.
All right, I hope all of you enjoyed the video. Please feel free to share the videos with all your friends and your colleagues as well to encourage them to create food pantries at your campuses. That being said, next slide. That being said, all of this would not have been possible without the collaborative help of the colleges that we worked with, specifically CSU East Bay. They have really an amazing pantry over at the campus, and I think some of them are actually on this call right now, so I wanted to give a shout out to them. They've done such an amazing job, and Los Medanos College, we've learned so much from them that we were able to take and also implement within their food pantry, within our food pantry. So over at CSU East Bay, California State University East Bay, they started using a lot of technology in order to meet students where they are. So what we realized is that nowadays, in this day and age, everybody uses their phones, everybody uses their computers, and rarely they actually look at flyers. So what we decided to do was reach out to students using their popular form of social media. So we actually created an Instagram to inform students about all that's happening with the food pantry and when they can pick up foods, the hours they can pick up foods, and the types of foods that they can pick up. So oftentimes during meetings at our campuses, we realize that there are a lot of leftovers, and what happens with those leftovers? Unfortunately, they get thrown away, right? So what we decided to do was let students know about when these meetings would happen, and if there were any foods left, we would invite students to come to the meetings and actually pick up foods. And students just really just love that. They were actually able to pick up sandwiches and lunches for themselves before class, or before they started studying, which was really great for us. Another thing we found out was that really the environment makes such a huge difference in regards to how students interact with the staff members. So I remember going to CSU East Bay, and everybody there was just so friendly. They have warm smiles. They waved at me. They said welcome. And I realized that when you're picking up food, that's something you really need. You need someone on the other line that smiles at you and waves at you and makes you feel welcomed. So what I did was that I took what I learned from CSU East Bay, took it back to Medanos College, and trained my staff so that they could approach the folks who are coming into the food pantry with a warm smile and with a wave, right? Now, we just have a lot of students coming in. They feel much more comfortable. They have smiles on their faces. A lot of my staff members have formed relationships with the students who have visited our food pantry, and now they're friends. So I think it really makes a huge difference. It's all about community, right? In addition, I think just learning from the collaborative with CSU East Bay and other colleges around our areas has really made a difference, because we're not perfect. Just like what Lester had mentioned before, the plan can be outdated, right? We're not perfect, but we're always striving to do our best. And with the collaborative, we are definitely on our way to becoming the best that we can be. Next slide. Right. With that being said, we're ready to take it to the next level. We've entered the second year now, and a lot has already been happening. We increased our hours to serve morning and evening students. We have partnered up with our tutoring center to provide snacks for students. So over at our tutoring center, what the tutoring coordinator noticed was that when students are hungry, they have to leave, and when they end up leaving, they don't come back to the tutoring center because they're gone already. So what we decided to do was actually provide foods for the tutoring center so that students would actually be able to eat while they study or do their tests. And that has made such a huge difference in retention, simply because students aren't leaving the campus and just staying home. They're actually staying on campus, getting nourished with healthy foods and continuing their studies, which is what they need in order to do well at Medanos College. Something I am super, super excited about is a new LMC campus opening. So we currently have a satellite campus over at the city of Brentwood, and we are opening up a new building as well. So what we're trying to do right now is that we're trying to open up a pantry over at the Brentwood Center. So we have identified a location, and we're on our way to starting up another Brentwood food pantry over at the Brentwood Center. That being said, when the new Brentwood Center gets built, we will be having a permanent location for the food pantry inside the Brentwood Center, which I am really excited about. So I'm going to go ahead and bring it back to Caitlin now for her to talk about the food bank's goals.
Yeah, so in year 2, we are planning to support growth of existing sites, working with 3 new sites, 2 community colleges and 1 state college that you see listed there on the slide. Though the new colleges, we're really trying to make sure they learn from the existing partners, and that's the best way, as I said, that the food bank can help share collaboration. We are also looking to add adult schools. We know that's a huge need, and so we really want to explore how we can help provide food on those campuses as well. Next slide. We know in order to be sustainable, we need to make sure that it's part of our normal operations, and that means continuing to commit staff time, which all of my nonprofit partners on the call will know means funding it. And so we know that this is a project that particularly speaks to individual donors, corporate donors. We've received some funds from a Kiwanis club, and exploring grant opportunities, both private and government grants. We really want to be able to ensure that we continue to be able to support colleges and continue to commit staff time, because we know this is so, so important, and it's important to our mission. John?
All right, so, it's all about community. Just like the instructor who went out of his way to provide free snacks for students, our community is really coming together. We have employees donating $5 a month from their payroll to support our pantry. We have support from our foundation on campus so that we can receive mini grants to provide foods and toiletries for our students. Outside and private organizations are hearing about the good that we're doing, so we're planning to apply for more private grants. Lastly, we will be entering into a challenge grant with the Community Health Fund that we are very excited to be part of. Lillian from the Community Health Fund will tell you more about the challenge grant that we're about to embark in.
Thanks, John. First of all, to funders out there, I cannot express on behalf of my board and the staff here how rewarding this collaborative, being able to support this collaborative has been, and how quickly, in terms of the timeline of me being at the Root Cause Coalition in 2017, we were able to move. The planning process that Lester described usually takes a good amount of time, 2, 3, 4 months, but everybody committed to this, the partners, to dedicating themselves to planning. And within 6 months, we funded it. And Caitlin, as she shared, board was astounded. $75,000, that's all you need. You don't need more. You don't want more. Honestly, I encourage you all to think about entering into this and putting your toe in the water, be it with one college or, working with a consultant such as we're privileged enough to have La Piana as a partner of ours in helping to generate and the thinking and facilitate the thinking or colleges and food pantries who wanted to do such a project. So as John said, where we are right now, the Community Health Fund supports the planning of projects and the launch and the pilot and evaluation. And we generally don't stick with a project for more than 2 to 3 years. And our support for this collaborative will end at the end of this year programmatically. But as part of that, sustainability is key. Programmatic sustainability and financial sustainability. So we have, as John mentioned, entered into conversations, and we're inviting proposals from each of the organizations, in which will provide a one-to-one match. And they'll develop their own fundraising campaign that will be restricted solely to support their college food pantry efforts. And then in terms of programmatic sustainability, the food bank, going back to the plan to hire a part-time college pantry coordinator. And the organization was so gratified by the work that was being done and the impact that they were making that the food bank is now committed, and the coordinator is working full-time. And then John just shared with us recently, Medanos College is in the process of building out a student union building, and the administration, so committed to sustaining this effort, is a dedicated space in the design of that building for the food pantry. So I hope that you all are taking away from this presentation today enthusiasm and learnings for what it takes to be able to do something like this at a collaborative level. And so with that, I'm going to thank you all so much for sharing and taking time to be with us and learn about our efforts here. And we're going to turn it back over now to Rachel, and she will field some questions for us.
Thank you so much to all of our panelists for sharing their expertise on this very important issue and topic. Now we are taking questions. If you haven't already, please feel free to submit a question through the GoToWebinar software, and I will pick a few to ask our panelists now. We've gotten a lot of great questions, so thank you so much for your thoughtfulness. One question that we received from a participant, this is to all the panelists, is have you considered expanding the services for employees of the college?
The employees of the college. So, our food pantry is open for our students. So this is John from Medanos College. Our food pantry is open for our students, but if any employees need food, they're more than welcome to come in because they are part of our community.
Thank you so much. Another attendee asked, how did you overcome stigma related to setting up this pantry? What obstacles existed in beginning this process?
Yeah, absolutely. So this is John from Medanos College again. So we're actually right next to the cafeteria, and I understand that there is a whole stigma that happens, but we try to make it anonymous and as fast as possible. When students come in, our students are greeted with a smile and a wave, and they are provided with a form. All they have to do is take about 1 or 2 minutes to fill out the form itself, completely anonymous, and within 2 or 3 minutes, they're completely out the door. So I think a lot, just the interactions with just people talking about the food pantry all over campus and every types of students using the food pantry itself really removes the stigma away from, picking up food.
Yeah, and this is Caitlin from the food bank. I think another way is the marketing materials that both colleges created are very friendly. They're catchy. Los Medanos has a big banner. CSU East Bay has really friendly chalkboards with recipes, really making that connection between it's a healthy food pantry. It's not something to be ashamed of. Everyone, it's open to everyone was really important. I think too, as John mentioned, and at CSU East Bay, they also do pop-up pantries, which have a lot of fresh produce, and they're basically just giving away fresh produce like a mini free farmer's market. And that creates buzz around campus and really helps to reduce stigma as well.
And this is Lillian with the Community Health Fund. What I've observed and learned from our partners is the staff that is hired at the pantries are students. And so it's peer-to-peer. Cal State East Bay calls them student ambassadors. And John shared that friendships are being formed. And I think just throughout the student community, stigma is it's destigmatized. It's okay to go on in. And John, you probably picked up on this. He's out there. He's present. He's listening. And, that speaks volumes to the culture at Los Medanos College as well as Cal State East Bay.
Another participant asked if the campus has received California state funding from the AB 453 Hunger-Free Campuses, and if so, how was that used for food security interventions?
Yeah, absolutely. So Los Medanos College does receive the state funds, so we have been actually using it on foods. We're relying on donations and other grants as well, but I think the state funding that came in really helped us out a lot. We've been able to increase the amount of food that we offer for students, healthier alternatives as well, just simply because we have these additional funds coming in.
Yeah, and with those funds, they were able to, this is Caitlin from the food bank, we're able to purchase more eggs, meat, produce, and so that really expands the amount of food that is available. And it's another reason why the food bank really supports policies. We try to advocate on policies that most successfully at the state level increase funding for anti-hunger initiatives on college campuses.
Yeah. In order for our food pantry to really remain open, especially during the early mornings and late evenings, is pretty much the student workers. So we're actually able to fund our student workers so that they can make ends meet and that they can also help support our students in terms of food insecurity as well.
Wonderful. Thank you all so much. We are just at the 2 o'clock mark. Thank you, everybody, for your wonderful questions. Obviously, here is the contact information for all of our wonderful panelists. If your question didn't get answered now, I'm sure they would be happy to touch offline. You are happy to reach out to us at the Root Cause Coalition, and we are happy to connect you to anybody else and help answer questions. Thank you again to our panelists for sharing all of their knowledge, and thank you for all of you for attending. A quick reminder that if you are interested in attending our national summit this October, that the early bird registration deadline is April 15th. To get that early bird discount, we hope as many of you as possible can attend. Final logistic note, the session has been recorded and it will be made available online as well as a copy of the slides. If you have any questions for our panelists or for the Root Cause Coalition, do not hesitate to reach out. Thank you so much and have a great rest of your Thursday.